I am very grateful and thankful to be on a Zoom call with Chief Lukens from the Alliance Police Department. I had the pleasure of visiting Alliance mid last month to talk about some elements surrounding school safety and virtual safety and the elimination of exposure of sexually explicit material to young people. And I want to take a moment and just say thank you to Chief Lukens and to welcome you to our interview.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, one, to come out and visit our city, as well as what you are doing for young people across the nation.
Well, I thank you for that. And at the risk of just congratulating each other back and forth, I can honestly say without the bravery of law enforcement, and this is a very different kind of bravery, but without the bravery of law enforcement, the willingness to tackle tough issues head on, our work would be almost impossible to do. So I too thank you very much. Chief, I wanted to ask you about whether or not you have seen an increase in sexually based crimes or cyber-based crimes over the last couple of years, and ways in which you are looking to address that.
Well, I want to say a couple of quick things. It's really difficult in law enforcement because a lot of our statistics are almost a year behind. So if you see now that the FBI's UCR stats are just now coming out for 2020. So we are able to look at our own city's statistics on what's in our records management system, but we're not maybe able to compare to other cities unless they provide us that information as well. So one of the things that we were recognizing in this trend was that violent crime across the nation is going up in cities all over the United States. And one of the things that I started really diving into was trying to figure out, not only are we having violent crime, but what was happening with sexual crime within our community. And it's one of those things that's very difficult because this type of a crime is how do you prevent it? There are a lot of things we talk about: lock your cars and people won't break in, right? Lock your doors unless people go into your house. All of those things are true. People don't leave their valuables in their cars if they don't want them taken. What do you do to prevent sexual assault? What do you do to prevent sex crimes? And when you meet with some of the sexual predators, a lot of times you'll hear these individuals say things like, well, she wanted me to do it, or he was doing this, or he was doing, and it makes them think that what their behavior is actually okay. And it kind of all comes off of this superficial stance. So what I started to get concerned is, how am I going to be able to curb what we have in our city? We saw that our numbers were about the same as last year, and I wanted to do something to get it to be dropping dramatically so that 2022, we're not going to see the amount of sexual assaults that we've been seeing in our city the last couple of years.
I appreciate that. I had an opportunity to meet with many members of your law enforcement community, and you've got some great people working with you. So I'm sure that is ingredient number one to achieving the goals of reducing crime.
Well, I would definitely say the officer's willingness to help educate the public makes a huge difference. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you see crimes that are different recently than they were previously in the last 4 or 5 years? Does crime seem different to you now?
Well, I think that goes back to this, why we're seeing violent crime trends. Crime is definitely changing because public policy is changing on the way that they interact with the police and the way people are interacting with one another. And we noticed that there's a large amount of internet usage in our community. Something that we probably hadn't been addressing in the past was how much usage and whether or not, people are being victimized. You hear people talking about phishing schemes and these other types of issues, but they don't necessarily report those to the police. But what we started to see is there's a huge trend of greater amount of internet activity. And I was telling the officers, it's like the Wild West out there. We're not even taming what's going on the internet right now. And there are all sort of crimes. So all of a sudden you see this drop in property crimes or crimes that are affecting people in person, because partly from the pandemic, perhaps. And then the other part of that is are these people staying inside and now committing crimes in the cyber world? So one of the things I did, several months ago is started getting the officers to start getting trained in multiple aspects of internet crime. And that all brings us back to why I ended up wanting to talk to Third Talk, is again, seeing activity that would lend us to believe that we have a lot of juveniles that are on the internet that are perhaps engaging in material that is not for their age.
Yeah. Yeah, North Carolina has seen a doubling in the cyber tips to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a doubling in human trafficking arrests. It has really been sort of an explosion over the past 18 months, simply around sex-based internet crimes. And we think that has a lot to do with the pandemic, keeping people at home more often and in front of their computers more often.
Absolutely. And especially when, you think about, 5 years ago, I never attended a Zoom meeting. Zoom is everything now, right? And everybody does that. And the kids are doing it. My kids are showing their mom, hey, this is how you get on. This is a very, very common practice. And with that being said, we recognize that the kids are getting involved in more activities. The problem is the whip hasn't cracked yet. A lot of people won't get that data and start to see that information of what you're talking about for another year and a half.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tell me a little bit about some of the ways that you have gotten the community involved in your policing of Alliance, and ways in which that they have benefited and that they are a benefit to you and your efforts.
Well, and as a part of our department's strategic plan, we have 3 different goals, and 2 of those goals, one of them is community engagement, and the third one is to prevent crime and disorder. So they go hand in hand. How do we get the community to help us police the community? Getting back to sexual crime, look, I'm not in people's houses. I don't know what they're looking at on the internet, but other people do, and other people see. So what we need to do is begin to facilitate and work with other people around us to pay attention to that. I think that was one of the valuable things that you gave in the Third Talk, is that conversation that needs to happen. And you watch that happen where a parent just says, hey, are you looking at porn? Have you seen internet porn? Do your friends look at porn? Those little conversations need to happen. So what ended up happening with me is I saw some information about you talking about having these conversations. Said, man, my city needs this. We need to do it. So I reached out to our Ministerial Alliance. It's a group of about 30 pastors in our community, something like that. They get together and they work on community problems together. And so they've invited me to a few of their meetings. And I brought up this issue, how we need to prevent sexual assaults from happening, many sexual assaults and many sex crimes in general. Whenever there's an arrest, almost always there's a search of a phone or computers or whatever, and it always entails pornography. It just almost always does. And so it's pretty synonymous with sexual crimes. And so hearing this discussion, I explained to the Ministerial Alliance how I thought that I really needed some support in the community in order to bring this type of a conversation forward, because this is the conversation nobody wants to have. This is like planning your funeral. Nobody wants to sit and talk about how to write their obituary, and nobody wants to talk about whether or not their kids are sexually assaulted or going to be. Yeah. And people don't want to have that conversation. And so that makes it very difficult. And so I brought this up to the ministers and said, could you start reaching out to your churches? Is this something that the community would support? Can you reach out to the masses? Because there's not many other mass dialogues that we have. We do have a Facebook dialogue, but we can't really get enough feedback sometimes from Facebook to find out what people are really thinking. And so I wanted people that had personal touch with individuals to kind of tell us their thought process. And that's what I brought up to the Ministerial Alliance. They reached out to their congregations, and the Ministerial Alliance said, hey, not only are we interested in this, but we would be willing to help sponsor this with you. We want to see this happen in our city.
Yeah, it was great. It was, you really have a great group of people. It was really exciting for me and beneficial to meet some members of the community, and certainly being able to provide some of this information was great as well. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about your experience in hearing the third talk is, A, did you find that information useful? And were there things about it that you would have added or deleted or changed? What was your take on the third talk?
So I would say flat out, just having the ability to realize you need to have a conversation. Third talk brings that up. And one of the points that you brought up is saying, you take your kid to somebody's house and you say, and by the way, we don't allow our kids to watch porn. I think that is something that we don't think about. And most parents would never even imagine. I had my own family come to the third talk. And afterwards, we debriefed this. We talked about this. And what I heard from other people as well that attended the event was the fact that there's this moment of we're not addressing an issue that probably has been silent for many, many years. And so that part of the conversation and that discussion, I think, was absolutely phenomenal. I would like to perhaps find ways to help link more information on the internet pornography usage and viewership to how it relates to the sexual assaults and some of the human trafficking, some of the examples. Part of why, again, I was intrigued by Third Talk is we had a female, I think she was 18, maybe she was 17. And she was talking to somebody on the internet for several months, and this person had been grooming her. And she took off to head to New York one day, and it took us several hours to get her stopped a couple states away. She had no idea she was headed right into a trap. And it all comes from this type of activity on the internet. And the problem that the challenge I face is trying to convey that to parents and convey this to other people. People don't want to talk about this. Even after, we had this meeting, and I've reached out to the pastors and many of the pastors, and there were other people that didn't attend and so forth at the meeting because of other obligations, watch the videos and stuff that are online, which I still think the in-person is a very good experience. The fact of the matter is some people are just now starting to have that dialogue, but from the presentation, it's difficult for me to say, I would add this and I would do those 20 things, because we're just trying to get people to have a conversation in their house, a very simple conversation. Hey, are you looking at porn? We don't allow pornography. We're not, it's so simple. But for these kids, it's creating a multitude of problems. It's just like alcohol usage. You said it in your presentation. There's no question when you take your kids to somebody else's house, they're not going to let your kids have alcohol. Why would we not suspect, pornography? But that's something that nobody wants to say, and people are uncomfortable with it for a variety of reasons. And any way that I can continue to partner in the future to help make that conversation easier to lay out, I want to do it, because it will make a difference in our sexual assault in our community. It will make a difference in other crimes, because we're talk about sexual assault, we talk about human trafficking, but one of the other aspects that I really encourage you to add is domestic violence. Because a lot of the activities that are in some of this pornography are behaviors that the kids are learning that that's what sex is supposed to be like. And so we have a tremendous amount of domestic violence in our community. And if people would learn that some of those acts that are occurring in these videos are actually criminal, and can be criminal, especially if not consensual. And in cases where people don't know if they can consent and they're confused and they're frustrated, that's very difficult to prosecute, but even more so if we could just prevent some of that in the first place. You hear women talk about, well, I thought that's just what we were supposed to do. I thought that was part of sex. And you're listening to them go, no, that's abuse. That's not okay. And so getting the kind of a conversation, people don't want to talk about it. When they talk about it is after they've been assaulted, they're in tears, they feel humiliated, they feel victimized, and you can only do so much, but no sorries in the world are going to make that be erased. And so my overall goal would be continuing to help any way I can to facilitate that dialogue, to prevent domestic violence, to prevent human trafficking, to prevent sexual assault. And then overall and above all of that, I think it as you were pointing out, you can see kids, they get so addicted, they're not doing well in school, they're not socially connected. All of those other issues are going to affect their life and their livelihood for years to come. And expounding on that and having examples of that, I think would be tremendous.
Well, Chief Lukens, I want to thank you, because just having this conversation and being able to get your feedback on what you thought will help other communities and other children hear this message. So I am incredibly grateful to you. And again, it takes a special kind of bravery to stand up and have a conversation that nobody wants to have, and to approach that with the community is something we greatly appreciate. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
You know, I think the biggest thing I would really challenge the law enforcement officials, chiefs, the sheriffs, the commanders, the academy directors, to really start getting a curriculum developed to teach their officers how to have these conversations. You know, we recently received a Department of Justice grant for community policing officers. Imagine having officers that are doing a neighborhood meeting or a neighborhood consultation of sorts to solve problems and to be able to address this issue. These are discussion points that I want my officers out there discussing. We discuss speeding. You bet we do. We discuss barking dogs. Yep. And we discuss theft. Absolutely. Burglary. You bet. Auto theft. And we discuss sexual assault. And we discuss what leads to it. And we discuss some of the ways that can be prevented. And I think the more that law enforcement officials will start to engage in the third talk and having that discussion, the better off their communities are going to be, and their sexual crimes will be driven down.
That's great. That's great. Chief, on behalf of everybody here at the Third Talk, I really want to thank you for having this conversation. Your hospitality and the generosity of you and your officers when we arrived in Alliance was exceptional, and I would look forward to returning, and I look forward to working with you to improve the lives of all of our kids across the country.
Absolutely, and I enjoyed it, and we look forward to having yet another conversation to continue to have these talks with more and more people.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.